Everyone has sweet memories of an ice cream truck, right? I remember racing through the park on sweltering summer days, all for a cone or bar as the sound of the iconic jingle got louder and the ice cream truck neared. But where did the magic of the ice cream truck truly begin? Like I said, nothing hits that sweet spot like an ice cream truck. It isn't just because of the irresistible soft swerve either, but everything about them. You know when something has a well-coordinated vibe and everything comes together perfectly? Those trucks are a lot like that. The music box melodies, the cruise, and slow gait of the truck brings back many memories. The thrill of chasing one down through the street just to get your favorite mint chocolate chip or double cookie ice cream are memories that every American kid is all too familiar with. As with most things that hit gold in more ways than one for a lot of people, you start to wonder where the magic reality began. Was it some dude in a janky truck rolling down most neighborhoods serving ice cream? Was it a big company idea that they put a lot of effort into? Buying ice cream actually looked a lot different in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It wasn't anything like what we're used to nowadays, or even back when ice cream trucks were the main source of brain freezes. You would have to buy ice cream from stall vendors on the street. They would serve it to you in this glass bowl and you had to return it after you were done, so people could never buy ice cream. Take it and enjoy it on their own time. This was called a penny lick, and it was the earliest version of the ice cream business you would find in America. Now skip a little forward to 1896, and we have Italo Marchionni, who changed up the entire game, and I personally couldn't be happier that he did. Who likes eating ice cream on the road? At least with a cone, you get to eat everything you pay for. That was definitely the idea Marchionni had when he was granted a patent in 1903 after emigrating from Italy in the 1800s, and he was the first person to make a device for making soft swerve ice cream cones in America. He called it an apparatus for baking biscuit cups for ice cream. And as with most things that are ingrained into the cultural fabric of Uncle Sam's lovely country, this happened in New York. Okay, so we have cones and penny licks, and don't worry, we're getting to how all of this ties into the creation of ice cream trucks. The next evolution that ice cream would follow in America was the invention of ice cream on a stick, which was made by Harry Burt. Burt was an upstanding lad from the good streets of Youngstown, Ohio, and he made a little bar known as Good Humor that off pretty well. Burt was actually running a copy of an idea he saw from another maker, Christian Kent Nelson. This man is the one who first came up with a solid plan for coating ice cream with a hard chocolate covering, and this was later known as the Eskimo pie. Okay, now you definitely might be asking what all this has to do with trucks. How do you think Good Humor kept the lights on in the place? Burt sold ice cream on sticks out of these memorable branded white trucks. This was the prototype, the blueprint, the very first take on a mobile ice cream making service that America had ever seen. But by far and away, it would not be the last. Still, it took a lot of work to perfect the formula of trucks, and they didn't start off with bed-mounted refrigeration capabilities like the ones we have today too. In order to make all this work, the driver, every time he had to sell ice cream, would go to the back of the truck, make and serve the ice cream there instead of through a window in the truck. These trucks were Ford Model Ts, and Good Humor sustained this practice well into the 1950s. After all, who else was doing it? When you strike a gold mine, you keep milking that cash cow dry. He actually did have an innovative spirit because he made this work with whatever was on hand. Burt even used his son's bobsled bells to create the iconic jingle that now everybody else associates with ice cream trucks. It was a pivotal moment of the history we're talking about today, really. One thing about ice cream trucks, Good Humor's or others, is that they all look pretty pristine. Squeaky clean trucks with a polished image coming down the block, but was that always the case? Actually, it was. Good Humor trucks had a really well-made image, and drivers would receive all-white uniforms and 3-day training before they could start their career as an ice cream maker, much to the joy of children nationwide. Burt would eventually pass in 1926, 2 decades after his genius business idea. But Thomas J. Brymer would take over matters and branch out Good Humor into the eastern side of the USA. He even opened their first branch in Chicago in the 1920s, and that was really when all of this started to gain some serious, history-defining momentum. You know when you can just smell that something is going to be special? Everyone was excited to see how these trucks would develop and what else they could really do given some time and trial and error. Plus, this was all right around the time of the Prohibition too, and people flocked to other things to satiate their cravings and need for socializing. Most did it at soda fountains, which were also taking off around the time, but getting a cone from a Good Humor truck had become a pretty common activity by the time the Prohibition was in full swing. It was also during the Great Depression when Bert's idea started to take off incredibly well. See, people needed a distraction, but they also needed it to be cheap. In that aspect, Good Humor ice cream was a literal godsend. It was cheap, delicious, accessible, affordable, and around everywhere you would go. The company did not really stop at trucks after all. They also had push carts, bicycles, even an entire boat and shoulder boxes. April through September, you could enjoy fantastic ice cream at dreamy prices no problem. Good Humor also created a lot of employment in the Depression, so by all accounts it was racking up the goodwill with people too. Unfortunately, this is also when our sweet story starts to take a sour turn. Shortly after Prohibition was announced, and right after the 1929 Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago by the North Side Gang, another unidentified mob attempted to run a textbook shakedown and capitalize on Good Humor's success. Arsonists had placed 2 bombs in the Good Humor factory that was located on Armitage Avenue. Seriously, shaking down ice cream trucks for kids? A part-time job wasn't even that hard to get back then. It isn't like today where you can apply to 20 places and not get a call back. So what was their excuse? Anyway, the explosion took out a ton of their manufacturing equipment and 2 trucks. Brymer actually refused them any kind of ransom money despite how they did heavy damage to the Chicago side of operations. However, the fact that he stood on business is what caused their goodwill to really skyrocket to massive levels. Crime rates were already rising sharply due to the desperation caused by the stock market crash, with people having no money, increasing inflation, and higher bills. In times like this, a man associated with providing one of the few comforts the American populace could enjoy, taking a stand against illegal activity, became a beacon of hope. This little setback would not hold back Brymer's company for too long. His father-in-law knew a stock speculator by the name of Michael J. Methan who invested in the operation generously. This did pay off, and eventually, Meehan acquired most of their trucks, up to 75% for $500,000. Pretty smart investment if I do say so myself. From there on, Elizabeth Higgins, his wife, was the registered owner of the company, and after this change in management, the Good Humor Corporation of America spread its hand to Connecticut, New Jersey, and expanded operations in its current places like Detroit, New York, and Chicago. The Brymer family was still involved, operating in Washington and California as well. By the 1950s, it had well over 2,000 sales cars patrolling the streets, spreading joy and rocky road cones to kids everywhere. Still, every story has its end, and Good Humor eventually met its own when the fuel crisis of the 70s made it unrealistic to continue operating at their previous scale. The company shifted its focus to capturing grocery store sales. You can still find some of the OG trucks as they are collectibles, and they go for 6 figures and above at auctions. Anyway, now you must have a pretty solid idea of how Good Humor set the stage for an ice cream truck takeover and paved the way for the industry. They showed America an idea that clearly worked even in the worst of times, and even if one source of the goodness dried up, people still wanted more ice cream truck magic. 2 military veterans and brothers, James and William Conway, would soon provide an answer in the shape of Irish-themed Chevy vans delivering green-colored soft swerve ice cream. Or, otherwise known as Mr. Softee, America's titanic franchisor of soft swerve ice cream and arguably the biggest player in the industry. Even today, the Conway family has kept the company running well after their passing. What Bert did was incredible, but it was not the modern truck we have come to know and love today. That was the result of all the efforts of Mr. Softee. In the 1950s, the brothers were working with a Swedish manufacturing company that dealt in producing milkshake machines and soft swerve dispensing equipment. Ambition and a few business smarts had them introducing their dream of perfecting the ice cream truck to Harvey Swenson, the founder of the company. When they didn't really get the support they wanted, they said they'd just do it themselves. Can't stop men with a mission and dollar signs in their eyes, now can you? Either way, they had the right idea. Mr. Softee is a cultural icon that is a broad childhood experience for so many kids. It's a bit of an understatement to just say that everyone's had one. They didn't just have one, kids memorized that jingle and could hear it with the precision of a bat from miles away. Even shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm starred an episode with it. You know, once, a New York mayor, Mike Bloomberg, actually tried to get the jingle to go away. It was some kind of city noise crackdown. While people agreed with other things he axed, they drew a fine iron line at the Mr. Softee jingle. There were entire protests across the streets of New York. Eventually, he had to compromise. The trucks were allowed to play the jingle, but only if they were moving. If only we could gather today for shorter work weeks or something. Still, what Bert created did not go unnoticed, and those two brothers were not the only ones with an idea to branch out into the ice cream truck scene. New York Ice Cream Coasters was actually made by former Softee employees, and turf wars began with quite a lot of determination from both sides over New York. It was an all-out ice cream war for the title of New York's soft swerve king, and neither would relent, though of course that meant awesome things and prices for the customers. That continued well into the late 90s, but people started taking inspiration from the converted step vans that Mr. Softee created, selling ice cream out the side window. There were more than 600 trucks operating in the U.S., selling basic and unique flavors. By this point, ice cream trucks had formed their own subculture within daily American life. They were no longer just a distraction from the woes of a failing economy, or an up-and-coming idea that people occasionally explored. The want and need for ice cream, specifically the one made by those trucks, was something that infatuated every American's heart. Teenagers on dates, engaged couples, kids playing in playgrounds, moms and dads, single people, and every demographic you can think of were aching for an ice cream cone from a Mr. Softee truck or one of its many copycats. Wherever they could find it, they would buy it. That's actually kind of why ice cream trucks became such a piece of the culture. The truck took on a life of its own, becoming a symbol of cooling off on refreshing, vibrant summer days and a sign of nostalgia down memory lane each time kids from the early, mid, and late 90s would hear the jingle. Parents would take their kids for one all the time. Cartoons would show bits of kids piling up at the nearest truck, like the Powerpuff Girls or Scooby-Dooby-Doo, and commercials were coming in on all the televisions and radio stations. The national urge and love for ice cream trucks had cemented itself properly, which is why there's still a pretty active presence in the ice cream market overall even into 2024. Nothing about grocery store-bought ice cream or a visit to your local ice cream shop could really replicate the experience. If you wanted to move up from there and have a better cone, you would really need to go to a dedicated parlor. Even companies that dealt in pre-packaged ice cream like Walls faced stiff regional competition from the onslaught of ice cream truck madness that took over America. They carved a piece of people's hearts in the market, and empires have been created on a lot less, really. In the 2000s, one of the competitors to Mr. Softee was Mr. Cool. They had new and riveting flavors like the Screwball, which was this bubblegum sherbet with a gumball surprise at the bottom. They even had a Spider-Man bar, which definitely drew in a lot of kids as Peter Parker's popularity was also soaring high into the heavens around that time. Mr. Cool actually started selling ice cream from a Crushman motorcycle, but they expanded operations to over 25 Grumman trucks in 1988, and they started doing everything. From simple single scoops to full-on banana splits, you name it, they had it. With them taking care of the heavy dessert side of things and Mr. Softee having wonderful sides like milkshakes, it seems that as far as sweet tooths went, Americans were covered in every regard. Honestly, we've had a lot of names come and go from the ice cream truck world, each leaving their own mark and signature flavor they became renowned for. Some did a better rocky road than any others you would find, whereas others had a killer mango sorbet. Names like Zassa's Gourmet Ice Cream in Philadelphia, Big Spoon Creamery in Birmingham, Cool House in LA, Sea Snacks LLC, Sticks and Cones in Charlotte. All of these trucks in these places kept the culture of ice cream trucks going strong and steady. It wasn't going to die off anytime soon, and anybody with common sense could see it. The industry was too profitable. It was also too safe. There was rarely ever any controversy attached to these trucks, so PR was always a breeze. After all, Who likes hating on the guy that makes your kid's day with a great cone? Absolutely nobody. Eventually, brands like Scream Truck would take it up a step further and even start delivering ice cream out of a truck right to the customer's doorstep, and most companies found it hard to compete with that angle. They had to adopt it, which meant that customers had it even better than they've been enjoying since the 1900s. Gotta love some feisty market competition sparked by innovation, right? The sales and ideas are to die for. I mean, doorstep service for your favorite buttered pecan or chocolate chip dough? Takes exactly all of a second to figure out why everyone signed up at the drop of a hat. Today, the ice cream truck industry has a staggering $1480.0 million net value, and it's only expected to grow at a rate of 9.3% from 2023 to 2030. By the time we hit 2033, it'll have a 100% increase. An ice cream truck is still a popular and amazing way to amp up your daily earnings for a lot of people. And as long as that's a thing, I don't see them dying off anytime soon, and I really hope they don't either. We need all the little joys possible, and there's nothing better at that game than an ice cream truck. Here we have it, the glorious and delicious history of ice cream trucks. What memories have you made with their jingles and soft swerve? If you like the video, make sure to subscribe.